Germany. Land of fairy tale castles. Land of ancient forests. Land of beer and traditions. The morning mist envelops ancient castles. The bells resonate among the spires of ancient cathedrals. The Christmas markets illuminate the squares of medieval cities. Welcome to Germany. Welcome to the beating heart of Europe. Known as the land of thinkers and poets, this is a place where medieval villages with half-timbered houses alternate with modern metropolises, and where ancient Christmas traditions have taken shape. But let's start from the beginning. Germany extends in the heart of Europe, touching more borders than any other state on the continent, fostering cultural and commercial exchanges that have shaped its identity throughout history. The territory varies from the Alpine peaks of the south to the coasts of the North Sea and Baltic Sea in the north, offering completely different landscapes between regions, as if they were many worlds enclosed in a single land. About 1/3 of the territory is cloaked in forests. Those same woods that inspired the fairy tales and legends of the Brothers Grimm, among shadows of centuries-old beech and oak trees. It is also a federal republic composed of 16 states, called Länder, each one guardian of unique traditions, dialects, and identities. Moreover, this land is a cultural giant, boasting 55 sites recognized by UNESCO, positioning itself in third place worldwide after Italy and China. From the majestic spires of Cologne Cathedral to the mining complexes of Wismar and Stralsund, every stone tells centuries of history and art. In this scenario, an highway network of over 13,000 kilometers, or 8,000 miles, unfolds, where 65% of the highways know no speed limits, making the famous Autobahn legendary throughout the world. But Germany is also the homeland of traditions that have conquered the planet. Here, in fact, the Christmas tree was born, and always here the first documented Christmas markets took shape, those of Dresden and Nuremberg. The Christkindlesmarkt of the latter still attracts 2 million visitors every year, transforming the squares into arenas of lights and fragrances. And speaking of fragrances, the typical one of Germany is surely that of beer, which fills the air of streets and squares, especially during the Oktoberfest in Munich. On this occasion, more than 7.5 million liters, or nearly 2 million gallons of beer are consumed within a few days. This is made possible also thanks to the approximately 95 million hectoliters, or 2.5 billion gallons, that are produced annually by hundreds of breweries, which makes this beverage now a tradition rooted in the foundations of the country. In German kitchens, moreover, there are more than 1,500 different types of sausages. The most famous are the bratwurst, grilled or roasted, and the currywurst, served in pieces with curry sauce and ketchup. But every region has its specialties, often linked to ancient preparation methods and local spices. The baking tradition is also deeply rooted. With almost 47,000 bakeries, in fact, Germany boasts the highest number of ovens in Europe. Every day, more than 300 types of bread are baked, and to these are added about 1,200 varieties of sweets and pastries from the oven, often linked to holidays or seasons. Finally, music resonates in the German soul through more than 130 symphony orchestras, led by the legendary Berlin Philharmonic, founded in 1882. Testimony of a country where almost every major city guards its own professional orchestra. Germany, therefore, is much more than a simple nation. It is an entire world, a place that continues to tell its story of innovation and tradition to anyone who visits it. But now let's go to discover the most incredible and iconic places of this nation. Berlin. The German capital extends between large avenues, rivers, and neighborhoods in continuous transformation. The Brandenburg Gate marks the meeting point between imperial history and the more recent one, when the wall divided two worlds. Remains of that border survive still today, but covered by murals that tell of freedom and memory. The Reichstag, which is the parliament building with its glass dome, reflects the idea of political transparency. On Museum Island, there are 5 museums where artifacts that have crossed millennia are preserved, from Mesopotamian civilizations to testimonies of ancient Egypt. A few steps away, cafes and markets animate daily life. Berlin, therefore, is marked by the contrast between modern buildings and austere architectures, between green spaces and tram lines in an urban landscape that never stops changing. Munich. At the foot of the Alps, this city unites tradition and innovation. Its identity is made of harmonious contrasts, Baroque squares, popular markets, and a culture that mixes local roots with international breadth. Marienplatz is the heart of the city, dominated by the neo-Gothic town hall, with the famous carillon that marks the hours. The historic breweries guard ancient rituals, and the English gardens offer green spaces crossed by waterways. The residence shows the wealth of a court that marks centuries of Bavarian history, while the future is given by modern neighborhoods and the Olympic Park built for the 1972 Games. Rhine Valley. The Rhine has cut through German territory for millennia, and the river flows among numerous castles, which emerge from the morning mist, ready to tell centuries of stories and legends. Marksburg rises intact since 1117, the only Rhine fortress that has never suffered destruction. The Lorelei, a 132-meter or 433-foot rock, juts out over the narrowest point of the river. Pfalzgrafenstein Castle instead rises on an island in the middle of the river and is an ancient customs house used to collect duties. Continuing, Bacharach preserves half-timbered houses from the 15th century and moreover preserves Werner Chapel, which was never completed. Finally, we find Oberwiesel, which keeps intact the medieval walls with 16 watchtowers. September transforms the valley into a mosaic of colors. There are the vineyards on the slopes that turn golden, while the mild climate allows river cruises and walks among the villages. Cologne. On the banks of the Rhine, the city lives around its Gothic cathedral with towers that soar visible from every angle. Inside, colored windows in medieval relics attract pilgrims and visitors for centuries. The historic center preserves stone streets rebuilt after the war bombings, alongside modern buildings and cultural spaces. The daily soul, however, is found in the bars along the river, where Kölsch is served, which is the typical beer. Cologne appears as a city of stratifications, where spirituality, popular life, and Roman heritage coexist in a single urban fabric. Neuschwanstein Castle. Hidden among the Bavarian mountains, it rises on a rocky spur that dominates valleys and alpine lakes. It was commissioned by Ludwig II of Bavaria as a personal refuge, with soaring towers and white walls, almost as a tribute to the world of Germanic legends. Inside, frescoed halls tell Nordic myths, with decorations rich in symbols and artistic references. The castle was never completed, but became one of the most visited places in Germany. From the Marienbrücke Bridge, moreover, the most famous view opens, with the entire structure framed by forests and waterfalls. Hamburg. Port city par excellence, it develops around the Elbe River in its navigable canals. The Speicherstadt, ancient warehouse district in red brick, tells the era of colonial trade. Not far away, the Elbphilharmonie raises its glass architecture, symbol of the contemporary city. The center hosts covered markets, elegant galleries, and crowded streets, while the neighborhoods along the port preserve the popular soul. Hamburg is also a freshwater city, with the Binnenalster Lake at the center of urban life. Its character remains, however, linked to the sea. In fact, here is one of the largest ports in Europe, point of departure and arrival of intercontinental routes. Black Forest. Extended between hills and mountains, it guards thick spruce forests, green valleys, and isolated villages. The hiking trails cross waterfalls, gorges, and lakes like that of Titisee, among the best known. Many villages preserve traditional houses with sloping roofs and cuckoo clocks, born right in this region. Among the peaks instead, to the south is the Feldberg, which is the highest mountain in the area, and becomes a destination for skiers and mountaineers in winter. Finally, the local cuisine reflects the same characteristics of the region, with robust dishes and the famous chocolate and cherry cake. Frankfurt. City of banks and skyscrapers, it rises on the banks of the main river. The financial center hosts the European Central Bank and a skyline that has no equal in Germany. But a few steps from the glass buildings, the main square called Nuremberg preserves half-timbered houses and the ancient town hall. Along the river, museums form a true cultural district, while the Palmengarten Botanical Garden offers a green oasis with exotic greenhouses and flowered avenues. Frankfurt is also linked to Goethe, who was born here and left traces in his house museum, and is a city that lives between modernity and tradition. Bavarian Alps. On the borders with Austria, imposing mountains, glacial lakes, and silent valleys extend. The Zugspitze, Germany's highest peak, offers panoramas that span beyond national borders. The alpine towns preserve wooden chalets and customs linked to the rhythm of the seasons. In winter, ski slopes animate places like Garmisch-Partenkirchen, while in summer trails and refugees welcome hikers. Alongside natural landscapes, monasteries, and castles dot the valleys, recalling a past made of devotion and local power. The alpine lakes, finally like the Eibsee, reflect forests and snow-capped peaks, creating suggestive scenery. Dresden. Nestled along the Elbe, it was the capital of Saxon princes and center of arts and sciences. The Frauenkirche, rebuilt after the bombings of World War II, dominates today's main square. The Zwinger, instead, with its Baroque gardens and pavilions, hosts world-famous art collections. Then there is also the cathedral, once court church beside the river, which still today marks the horizon with its Baroque facade. The modern city was reborn from the rubble, between contemporary buildings and creative neighborhoods animated by cafes, while music, architecture, and history interweave with daily life on the river. Stuttgart. Surrounded by hills and vineyards, it develops in a valley crossed by the Neckar River. It is home to major automotive brands like Mercedes and Porsche, which here have museums dedicated to their history. The center unites modern squares and historic buildings, like the Old Castle and the New Castle, testimonies of different eras. Green spaces are an integral part of the city, from Rosenstein Park to the gardens that climb toward the hills. A unique detail is that the vineyards reach almost to the streets, sign of a deep connection with wine culture. Stuttgart therefore unites industry and nature, innovation and tradition. Harz Mountains. Mountainous region of central Germany, it guards thick forests, caves, and medieval villages. The peaks are wrapped in popular legends which tell of witches and ancient rites. Small towns like Goslar and Wernigerode show half-timbered houses and paved squares, preserving intact atmospheres. Hiking trails cross waterfalls, highlands, and artificial lakes born to feed the old mining activities. This place is therefore a natural landscape certainly marked by man, but remained deeply linked to myth and memory. Düsseldorf. It is an economic and creative crossroads and is nestled on the Rhine River, whose vitality is reflected in urban daily life. The Königsallee, with its shops and tree-lined canals, is one of the most elegant streets in Germany. The old town, called Altstadt, concentrates breweries and venues, which animate the evening life, serving the typical dark beer, which is linked to customs still very much alive here. The city is also a cultural hub, with museums dedicated to modern and contemporary art. The architecture of the renewed port, finally, shows buildings signed by great international names. Nuremberg. City of Franconia, it is linked to a complex and stratified history. The imperial castle dominates from above, sign of its role in the centuries of the Holy Roman Empire. The center preserves medieval squares, Gothic churches, and markets that attract visitors from all over the region. The Christkindlesmarkt must certainly be remembered, which is the oldest Christmas market and among the most famous in the world, and attracts traditions and tourists every year. It is precisely in this period of the year that the daily connection between local craftsmanship and cuisine is highlighted, which ranges from dark beer to typical sausages. Rhineland-Palatinate. Region marked by the Rhine and the Moselle, which unites vineyards, castles, and historic cities. The hills cultivated with vines produce some of the most appreciated white wines in Europe, particularly Riesling. Picturesque villages rise along the rivers with half-timbered houses and animated squares. Nature shows itself in gentle landscapes alternated with gorges and volcanic formations. The wine roads, finally walkable on foot or by bicycle, recall a territory deeply linked to its production. Heidelberg. On the banks of the Neckar River rises this town, between wooded hills and luminous valleys. The castle, partially in ruins, dominates from above, while the historic center develops around paved streets and Baroque houses animated by cafes and bookstores. The city is known for its university, among the oldest in Europe, which for centuries has welcomed students from all over the world. The old bridge crosses the river, connecting the two shores with statues and towers that enrich its appearance. In the surroundings, paths climb toward a panoramic route loved for centuries by scholars and travelers. Leipzig. City of Saxony, it has always had a central role in commerce and culture. The market square, with the Renaissance town hall, guards the historic soul. Here Bach worked as chapel master at the Thomaskirche, still today home to the famous choir. The navigable canals certainly recall its mercantile vocation, but the city is also modern, with creative neighborhoods born from the recovery of former factories. Leipzig moves between past and future, with music that remains its identifying feature. Saxon, Switzerland National Park. Southeast of Dresden, along the border with the Czech Republic, a landscape shaped by sandstone formations opens. Rock towers, deep gorges, and wooded highlands define a unique territory. The Bastei Bridge, suspended between pinnacles, offers one of the most suggestive views over the Elbe Valley. The park is also a refuge for rare species, including the golden eagle and the peregrine falcon. The trails, moreover, lead to medieval fortresses like Königstein, which watches from above over this natural labyrinth. Bremen. It has been for centuries the Hanseatic city linked to maritime commerce and faces the Weser River. The market square is the beating heart, with the Gothic Renaissance town hall and the statue of Roland, symbol of civic freedoms. Beside it, the Cathedral of St. Peter guards crypts and medieval treasures. The Schnoor Quarter preserves narrow alleys and colored houses, which once housed fishermen and artisans. Modernity is reflected along the docks and in the museums, while the connection with the Brothers Grimm fairy tale is recalled by the statue of the Bremen town musicians, which has become one of the most photographed places in the city. Bamberg. The stone streets rise and fall between half-timbered houses, stone arches, and small squares. The historic center develops on 7 hills and faces a river that seems to embrace the city. The Little Venice is the place that comes alive along the canals, with boats moored among the old fishermen's houses. The Romanesque cathedral dominates from above, with its 4 towers visible from every angle, while the old town hall stands on a bridge, suspended between 2 shores. Here, every detail seems to maintain intact the connection between water, stone, and tradition. Rügen. Germany's largest island, it faces the Baltic, with jagged coasts and sandy beaches. The Jasmine National Park guards the famous white chalk cliffs, which rise vertically over the sea. Beech forests reach to the edge of the cliffs, creating a landscape rare in Europe. The coastal villages show houses with thatched roofs and ports animated by fishing boats. Places like Binz preserve elegant spa architectures, born at the end of the 19th century. The piers that stretch into the sea instead become panoramic points over the Baltic. Rügen is today a beloved destination for nature and silence in a subtle balance between sea and woods. Hannover. Wide tree-lined avenues connect parks, modern neighborhoods, and remains of the historic city. Even though heavily marked by bombings, the city has chosen not to hide the scars. In fact, here urban rebirth coexists with wide open spaces and a daily life with a relaxed rhythm. The Herrenhausen Gardens open like a green geometry, with fountains, sculpted hedges, and water games. The center mixes buildings reborn after the war with contemporary structures and animated markets. In the surroundings, finally, the Maschsee Lake becomes a meeting space where people walk or relax by the shore. Aachen. In the heart of the city, Charlemagne's cathedral imposes itself with its octagonal dome and Byzantine columns. Inside, light refracts on the golden mosaics, while the ancient throne remains at the center of silence. The center streets are dotted with cafes, shops, and details that recall its imperial role. The proximity to Belgium and the Netherlands, moreover, is also reflected in the markets and in the different dialects spoken. Freudenberg. A single neighborhood, built with a regular scheme, reveals itself to tourists with its unmistakable geometry. The houses, all white with black beams, create an almost hypnotic visual effect. One walks among similar buildings, but never identical, each with its own detail, like a flower at the window, an aged door, a faded plaque. The historic nucleus is enclosed between meadows and wooded slopes, while the sloping roofs design a cohesive urban landscape, often seen only from above, but lived step by step. It is a place where uniformity becomes identity and repetition becomes a form of art. Rothenburg ob der Tauber. Inside the medieval walls, every corner seems to have remained intact in time. Half-timbered houses face paved squares with sloping roofs and wrought iron signs. The town hall tower rises in the center, while the sentry walk still allows to walk part of the ancient fortifications. In the evening, low lights reflect on the ochre and red facades, creating a suspended atmosphere. The shop windows show wooden toys, traditional sweets, and worked tin objects. Today, among tourists and inhabitants, life flows calmly within a perimeter that has known how to defend its own rhythm. Quedlinburg. At the foot of the Harz Mountains, an intricate network of alleys and wooden houses extends. A little more than 1,000 half-timbered houses from different eras tell centuries of daily history. On the rock, the imposing collegiate church dominates the panorama, with Romanesque towers and a silent cloister. The air carries with it the smell of resin and stone, while in the courtyards one notices gardens, geranium pots, and clotheslines. Many artisan shops still occupy the original spaces in a historic center included among UNESCO heritage sites. Bavaria. On the Rhine, among vertical vineyards and ruined castles, this medieval village tells more than 1,000 years of history through its half-timbered houses. Merchants built it as a mandatory stopping point for ships, forcing them to stop to pay duties. Standing dominant over the city is Stuttgart Castle, a 12th century fortress transformed today into a youth hostel, offering one of the most spectacular panoramas of the Rhine Valley, declared UNESCO World Heritage. House roofs, meanwhile, tilt in all directions, supported by oak beams forming geometric patterns, while wine has flowed here for centuries, with Riesling growing on terraces sometimes so steep that vintners must anchor themselves with ropes for harvesting. Goslar. Surrounded by the mining reliefs of the Harz. This town preserves buildings covered in dark wood and slate, which reflect in the wet cobblestones, often shiny with rain. The imperial palace with medieval frescoes and slate walls recalls when the assemblies of the Holy Roman Empire gathered here. Below, bourgeois houses flank shops and breweries in a compact but dense center of architectures. The sound of bells accompanies daily life, while tourists and residents meet in outdoor cafes. Monschau. A maze of paved alleys, winds among wooden houses squeezed close to each other, nestled in the Eifel Valley. The Ruhr River crosses the center with restored mills and stone bridges, which unite the two banks. The half-timbered facades, white with dark frameworks, reflect on the water, while shops offer fabrics, blown glass, and spiced sweets. Above, the fortress dominates the landscape, with thick walls and views over the slate roofs. Daily life intertwines with slow tourism, made of walks, seasonal markets, and outdoor cafes. Kochen. Along a bend of the Moselle, half-timbered houses mirror themselves in the river, among terraced vineyards. We find ourselves in Kochen, with an imperial castle dominating the valley from atop a rocky hill. Vineyards descend in steep terraces to the riverbanks, producing some of the region's best Riesling. Traditional German houses have colored facades and sloping roofs, while historic taverns serve local wines and regional specialties. Bernkastel-Kues. Facing both banks of the Moselle, it is a union of two souls divided by water. On one side, there is an intact medieval center with half-timbered houses squeezed together, collected squares, and a central fountain. On the other, the quieter area with residential streets and terraces on the river. Above everything, there are the vineyards, which climb up to the ruins of Landshut Castle. Here, the atmosphere is made of small details, like a wrought iron sign, a flowered window, a boat floating on the water without haste. Wernigerode. At the edges of the Harz forest rises a compact center where houses seem colored by hand one by one. The town hall, decorated with wooden sculptures and flowers at the windows, is the meeting point between markets and wayfarers. The small streets climb toward the castle, which dominates the village from above, with pointed towers and ivy-covered walls. An old steam railway starts from here, directed toward the Brocken, the highest peak in the area. In the center, the smell of cinnamon sweets mixes with that of rain on stones, and the entire village seems to live in balance between fairy tale and daily life. Baden-Baden. Among the hills of the Black Forest, the center of this village opens on elegant avenues, neoclassical buildings, and manicured gardens. The thermal baths, still active, attract travelers for centuries. The Kurhaus building hosts concerts and games, while the nearby porticos offer shade and cafes facing flowered flower beds. The boutiques, art galleries, and theaters design a cultured and discreet urban landscape. In some streets, the sound of water from a fountain covers the low voices of passers-by, and this too reveals the authentic essence of this village. Concluding this visual journey through Germany, we have moved from the charm of its varied landscapes to the most famous icons of its historic cities, discovering together not only places, but also curiosities that make every corner of this country unique. We hope that the images and stories told have enriched your knowledge and stimulated the desire to personally explore the extraordinary beauty of this nation.